more about Fernando, that even before he came to India, he was quite curious about Indian mystics. So he even had taken mantra from one of the things that he observes, that despite all the odds, there was a constant resistance to these anti-humanist tendencies. So there was a caste system, there was untouchability, there was sati system, and throughout the history, there has been a different kind of resistance to challenge this, bring about the change. What he also observed was that all this resistance was more or less non-violent. So there was no big mutiny, there was no big revolt. It was gradual and subtle resistance building up and spreading throughout the Indian culture. So before starting, in the first part, Fernando is explaining what is humanism for him. Humanism itself has a multiple definitions and different people can define it differently. So Fernando shows the whole thing as humanism as one in favor of humanist attitude. There are 6 expressions of humanist attitude. It's good to reiterate the same. So the first is placing the human being as the central value and concern. So now when Fernando is studying the history of humanism in India, he's looking at it about different developments and how it affected human being. It's not about war, it's not about kingdom, it's not about technology, it is about human being. The second aspect of humanist attitude is affirming the equality of all human beings. Nothing about the human being, but at the same time, no human being below another. Fernando builds this particular aspect throughout the different phases of the history. The third point is acknowledging both personal and cultural diversity. India has been a melting point of different cultures, right from Harappan civilization to different stages of the history. There has been a big diversity and positively impacting each other, respecting personal and cultural diversity. The fourth point, which is a very important point and often missed out by many other people, is that tending towards developing knowledge beyond what is accepted as absolute truth. This is a very, very important aspect of humanism. Humanism opposes dogmatism. Humanism is opposed to absolutism. Rather, which believes in constantly challenging whatever is considered as absolute truth, that stage of the history. It is only because of this part of humanist attitude that humanity has evolved. If during night there is a darkness and you have to live with darkness was the rule of the day, it is human being which challenged and eventually created a light at the night. If all of us study in all aspects of human evolution, it is this attitude, challenging what is established as absolute truth. So just to give a little example in our current context, money is everything is absolute truth today, but humanism would challenge it. Formal democracy, where corruption is a part of politics, is absolute truth today, but humanist attitude will challenge it. And going beyond whatever is believed as absolute is what is humanist attitude. Recording in progress. The fifth one is about upholding freedom of thought and belief. India had a lot of invaders and different religious currents came in. But somehow, India also witnessed tolerance of each other and this whole idea that everyone has a freedom of thought and belief. This is an essential part of humanist attitude. What we have recounted so far is five aspects, and the sixth aspect is about repudiating or opposing all kind of violence non-violently. So be it physical, racial, religious, economical, psychological, moral, or even internal violence. Anything that harms human being or hinders his growth is violence. And humanist attitude is to oppose all forms of violence. These are the six aspects of humanist attitude, and Fernando is going to use these six as the running thread in his examination of Indian history. What Fernando did was that he divided Indian history in particularly three phases. One was response to Aryanization. In the book, he explains that as per different historians, there are different theories. One theory was that at some stage, Aryans invaded India, and there is another theory that there was nobody invading India. These were the civilization already in this subcontinent, and they just migrated from one place to another. Either case, our idea is not to get into debate whether Aryans came from outside or they were from inside, because Fernando explains in this book that good is what unites people, bad is what divides them. So if we go on fighting whether they came from outside or not and keep a big fight, it is bad. But if we say in either case, they demonstrated a cultural diversity. It is very clear that at one phase in Indian history, Aryan influence started spreading. But before that, there was already a civilization, there was already a history, and there was a coexistence of these two cultures. Fernando is explaining that this particular phase shows very, very brilliantly the convergence of diversity and how each culture influenced each other. In fact, humanism proposes, as one of the organisms says, convergence of culture is to respect the diversity and build on the positive aspects of each other. And nowhere in human history it is as clearly evident as in Indian history about how different cultures lived together, learned from each other, and extracted the positive aspects. So this was one aspect, one stage, Aryanization. What happened when Aryans came and Sanskrit came and Ved came, and before that, what was there, and all along how the society was converging all the different diversity. Then Fernando explained there is a second stage of theocracy, something with an impact of religion that happened post the arrival of Mughals. Mughals came to India, and with them largely came Islam. Mughal remained in India for more than 2 centuries, and there was a lot of interaction convergence between different religious communities. One of the things that happened at that time was a very, very strong caste system in India. And all along, there was a resistance to this caste system. There was a supremacy of Brahmins. They would know Sanskrit, they would know the rituals, and they had a certain kind of power over masses, whereby a certain class of people will be even deprived of the basic survival. It was in this context that right from origins of 500 BC, that is Jainism, Buddhism, Patanjali, this different aspect which was primarily to oppose the discrimination caused by caste system. Then came this whole concept in Hinduism of Advaita, that is, God is in every human being. Human being and God are not two different things. This brought about a very, very different perspective and richness. And now we are talking about almost 2 millennium before, where the whole culture started respecting all human beings as something that is common to all. Human being and God are same. So there was a phase of the rise, that is a period of Buddhism, Jainism. Then there was a period of Mughal Empire, and then there was a period of Bhakti movement. So Bhakti movement started again, once again, bringing in this whole power of equality of all human beings and talking about non-discrimination, saying that everyone has access to God, everyone can get in love with the God. And right from Ramanuja onwards to Narsi Mehta, to Kabir, to Nanak, to Mirabai, this particular different phase came all across India, again opposing this violence and exploitation and discrimination in the society. Then came the phase of British rule. And Fernando explains that during British rule, India became a very, very important point laid by Gandhiji about non-violence. Before that, there was also a response in the form of reforms. So Raja Ram Mohan Rai and Dayanand Saraswati, Brahmo Samaj, and there were again a number of reformers, again opposing anti-humanist practices prevailing at that time and reviving the dignity of human being, bringing them to a equal level. So that was a time when we had Rabindranath Tagore and Sri Aurobindo and many people, Vivekananda, bringing in this whole part. Independence struggle was again a struggle, bringing all Indians on one platform, irrespective of their caste and creed. People participated in struggle. So respecting each other's culture, respecting each other's diversity, coming together. It was facilitated largely by the colonial looting, the massacre of Jallianwala Bagh, non-cooperation movement, civil disobedience movement, Quit India movement, in bringing people together. Fernando brings out this particular point that independence movement was one of the very, very important stage in Indian history in which this equality of all human beings coming together, working together without any caste and creed prevailed for a long time. Post-independence were proposals like M.N. Roy with radical humanism, Vinoba Bhave and Sarvodaya movement, and a very important was the resurgence of Buddhism with Dr. Ambedkar, again opposing the caste system and discrimination. Fernando concludes the book with reiterating this aspect. One, let's have clarity of our point of view. Human, humanist attitude, 6 points of humanist attitude. Two, the phase of human history, arrival and rise of Aryans and that era. Second, theocracy, much more closer, maybe 500 BC onwards. This whole revival with Shravak movement, so it be Jainism, Buddhism, Patanjali and all, going up to the Bhakti movement. Third, the whole impact of colonization and colonialism all across this history. Maybe 4,000 years, maybe 7,000 years is a date we examined by historians. Fernando has highlighted throughout the book various traits and various phases in which India as a culture exhibited time and again this trait of humanist attitude, respect for all human beings, unity in diversity, respecting each other's, working together, finally opposing all forms of violence, non-violent. He explains that non-violence as a form was there not so much in Vedanta, but were very much reiterated in Upanishads, but very strongly put forward by Buddhism and Jainism. So non-violence in Indian history is a very long route, and it was brought to another height by Gandhiji in freedom fight. Basically, with all this, Fernando, who is an Argentinian, feels very proud about his study of Indian history. He feels that there has been a great current of humanism, all aspects of humanist attitude, the long history of Indian society. Convergence of diverse culture, race, religion, philosophy, art, literature, poetry, science, technology, architecture, music, diet, everything went on interacting with each other. Nothing now original, lot of influence of culture with each other and respecting the diversity. Fernando suggests that it's good that we all are aware that we are part of the country which has time and again shown importance of humanism in general life. Thank you. This is a broad outline of the book.
Thank you, Parimalji. Now we have time for questions and answers. Anyone who wants to ask a question, please raise your hand or unmute yourself and ask directly because we are a small audience. Let me start this discussion, Parimalji, by asking you whether you see the same struggle which was there earlier between humanism and the forces of racial and caste discrimination. Do you see the situation today in India also represents a conflict between humanism and the forces of racial and caste discrimination?
See, my role today was to summarize the book. So I can only bring the perspective of Fernando in the book. As far as the current situation is concerned, the question of debate for different people taking it from different perspectives. If I will tell you from the point of view of the book, then it is that Any struggle against any exploitative, violent, discriminative forces is a process. It's not one event at a time. It's a process about mass awareness. So certainly, whenever there is a certain level of exploitation, masses rises, and from there the current has new current has survived. So if you say that Buddhism and Jainism, uh, Brahmins were very, very dominant and untouchability had reached new height and exploitation was at a peak. And from there came this whole proposal that all human beings are equal and everyone can have equal access to spirituality and different aspects. And it got mass acceptance. So this history of India shows that whenever excess of these things have happened, new currents have emerged. It is not so much about the individual representing that current. So is it not about Buddha or Mahavir? It is a sensibility that is already growing in the heart of people where their proposals find easy acceptance. So if, I won't say if, to large extent, it is not only that the religions and political division that is taking place in India. In fact, economic violence and psychological violence is a far severe violence spread all over the world. For a large number of people, indifference to these great wars going on, a good number of people benefiting from the wars taking place at other places, a good number of people taking advantage of the current time for their own benefit and imposing their ideas on others. There is a great amount of dehumanization prevailing all over the world, and India is not.
Parimalji, when we
Yeah.
analyze other countries also, particularly in European culture, there is also some humanist values and humanist culture there. Fernando wrote a book about India because he likes India very much. I think in each country there is a background of humanist views and aspiration. So, do you agree with my point?
You're perfectly all right. It is a humanity as a whole. There is no Chauvinism that there is a one country or another country. And I agree with you 100% that Fernando studied Indian history and he identified the trait of humanism, humanist attitude in Indian history. Maybe somebody else can study the global history from the same point of view and find out a similar thing from any corner of the world. All said and done, human history is a struggle to overcome pain and suffering. So human evolution has taken place always, bringing human dignity as more and more central value. So every culture has many positive aspects. Every country or every place, and all said and done, the concept of country is a very recent in human history. So you can say every part of the world has many positive aspects, and if one studies, sure, there will be different findings.
As a matter of fact, if I may add, may I?
Go ahead.
Yes. As a matter of fact, he himself says that he doesn't propose that his book is complete or the only authentic thing. He expects us to as humanists add to that work. And if a better version is possible, we should come out with a better version of the book in the near future. That is his request through the book. That is what I understand. And he has very rightly put it that in the West, some people in the West, they just because they have coined the word humanism, they try to take some kind of ownership of the entire concept of humanism itself, and that is what he tries to clarify in this book. And he also very clearly puts it that this is not complete. and he expects all our inputs in the future. The humanists to add on to this book, to the pages of the book and history.
I wish to ask about specifically the non-violence element of Indian civilization. And you rightly said that economic violence, military violence as well as economic violence is the contemporary issue. So what is this? What is the element of non-violence? How non-violence? Gandhi showed one way of non-violence, but what is this method of non-violence which can counter violence? I think that must be discovered further. For example, in Bhakti movement reform, our saint poets, they used, they introduced reforms indirectly. That is interpretation of Gita. For example, Dhaneshwari interpretation of Gita, which is a different interpretation, and indirectly it is reform. So I think it is also because culturally Indians don't like aggression. This is also one observation. So how do we develop this non-violence idea further in order to add to what Fernando wrote? This is my question.
Well, this can be responded by anyone. I am responding as one of the participants here. It was discussed in our work that opposing all forms of violence non-violently is what is important. So this whole aspect called active non-violence is what is it. As you said about Bhakti movement, that maybe the time of Kabir and Nanak, where they came up instead of fighting with the other orthodox, they created a new proposal. They went on reaching out to the people, and eventually they started a mass following. So it can be that humanists come up with this whole understanding of human being as equal, all human being as equal, and reach out to the masses, and the masses will accept it. So the whole process, Gandhi had one common enemy, that was British and colonization and all. But when there is a diffused enemy, one of the things that was done all along was that instead of fighting head on with the people in power, rather they worked reaching out to the large number of people. And as you explained in Bhakti movement, so is in all the reforms. It was acceptance by the common people that made the real drastic change taking place. One of the beauty in Indian history is that more or less all these changes were aimed at the root to religious or spiritual work. So discrimination was opposed by Buddhism, Jainism by another proposal, Bhakti movement by another proposal. Rules like treat others as you would have them treat you in another form. So instead of fighting head on, it was leading and reaching out to large number of people with positive proposals. That was done before, that will be only way out in the future.
Thank you.
No, actually, what I think is Parimal is actually today explaining about the book and the 3 points which Fernando has looked into about the non-violent way of and humanistic approach of the Indian culture and all those things. So about the central value and all, it is totally a different thing, which we have to explain later. But today is about the book, I think.
But Dayanandji, in the book itself, one of the, as Parimalji was saying, one of the aspects of humanist attitude is human being as a central value. So I think that discussion is quite in place if Parimalji wants to respond to it.
So in a very simple terms, it is like whatever is under discussion, how does it impact human being? And then we talk about not one or two human beings, all human beings. So keeping that as a central value, everything should be evaluated. Now, this is a very simple term. Then there is a little complex term that all said and done, whatever is in society is ultimately created by human being. So be it society, be it government, be it democracy, be it instrument of money, everything is created by human being in order to improve the life of humanity. So before the currency, maybe people were doing barter, and then there was a lot of inconvenience, and then they came with gold, and then they came with currency note, and then they came with money, and then all along it was a medium of exchange. And at one stage, it became a tool for few people to exploit others. So money was created by human beings. The society and even the injustices done by human being, they will be changed by human being. So placing human being as a central value gives a very simple benchmark of looking at everything about how it affects the human being. And somewhere, Fernando explains the difference between absolute and relative. So there was a stage, and there is a one school of thought in India. Non-violence is absolute non-violence. So it means that no way, even if somebody is attacking you, you are justified to take arms. So in Indian history, there are moments, there are times when it remained absolute non-violent. And then somewhere they interpreted as relative non-violent. And that is how the society needs army and needs different things. And that is how the different school of thought evolved. So non-violence is harming any human being. If you believe that you are human, then others are human, then nothing justifies in harming any other human being. So when we start considering everything from the point of human being in our day-to-day life with everyone around us, in our social context with the social practices and social development, political, international, then very, very simply speaking, it comes up to opposing all kind of violence. These six aspects of attitude are not mutually exclusive. They are interrelated and reinforcing each other. So placing human being as the central value is the reason for human evolution. Whenever different things are discovered, it is to make life of human being better. And keeping this life of human being better is what is a very, very important part of humanist attitude.
Anyone else? Are there any more questions? Parimalji, since you mentioned Dr. Ambedkar, what comes to my mind is that both Gandhiji as well as Ambedkar tried very hard to bring about a change in the perception of Indians regarding untouchability. And Dr. Ambedkar also tried all non-violent means like satyagraha for access to community source of water. He also launched another satyagraha for entry into the temples. And when all these failed, he decided to convert to Buddhism. And when he did that, one of the points that he made was that all his efforts have fallen flat simply because most of the Hindus still believe in the authority of the scriptures. And they don't want to go beyond the scriptures. A point which you made very, I think, emphatically, that development of knowledge beyond absolute truth. So he realized that most of the Hindus are not willing to go beyond the scriptures. And so long as they stick to scriptures, this caste discrimination will continue. And therefore he opted out of Buddhism, opted out of Hinduism and embraced Buddhism. So, I mean, that is a very important part of our modern history. And what do you think we should learn from that experience?
First of all, there is a question of interpretation. This whole point that Hindus are not shifting from the scripture is based on the assumption that there are some scriptures that they are referring and some other scripture which they are ignoring. All said and done in various points of Upanishads, there is no reference about casteism. There is a reference about God is in all human beings. And when we talk about Advaita, that is also part of the scripture. So it is not anything to do with a particular scripture, but it is more about the mindset of the previous people and the notions prevalent at that moment of time. Gandhiji had his own way of influencing this current by setting his own example. So he would clean the toilet, he would go and live with the Harijans, he would go and work with them. And certainly it brought in far more sense of humanism. That is by setting example, by doing what you believe right, and knowing fully well that it is a work, that is a process. It is not something that I demand today and it will change tomorrow. So whatever Gandhiji has done has triggered great turning point for the entire human history. He has set this example of all human beings as the central value, that all violence has to be opposed non-violently. So it was a very, very different approach. As far as your reference of Ambedkar is concerned, he is a great leader, but we have to understand that each one in the history have the specific context in which they are operating. Each one has a specific understanding of the approach that they will do. They have to face tremendous amount of resistance. So while you will see Ambedkar on one side, you have to see Savitri Devi on the other side. Which was that not which is this Pune University?
Savitribai Phule.
Savitribai Phule. Now Savitribai Phule is on another side. So you have different people. Though there may become one leader, truly it is a mass understanding and mass approach that is what is important. So Ambedkar did what, according to him, the best thing at a time. They might have succeeded in translating from themselves from one religion to another, but need not be that the rest of the society have changed their treatment to them. So it is whenever we look at history, we have to respect the constraint within which each individual operated and the kind of social phenomena at that moment of time. But one thing is clear, Indian history is full of all kind of exploitation and also full of resistance of this exploitation and a proof of constantly evolving and becoming better society.
Thank you, Parimalji.
So, yes.
While one can agree with Parimal on looking at anything in the context of the person, particularly with your reference to Ambedkarji and Gandhiji. Let me put them both together. There is something which is core to the human beings, which does not change over thousands of years, no matter what level of human civilization that we are talking about. And in that context, fraternity, equity, all kinds of equity that Ambedkar talked about, which Gandhi talked about, the non-violence that Gandhi practiced, all this becomes all the time applicable. It was true 1,000 years ago. It will be true 1,000 years later, as long as human beings survive. To that extent, what I would want to bring about, while Gandhi's contribution to his values to core to the human beings, which are very, very humanistic as the core value of humanist movement, for bringing the freedom, which is the core value which even Fernando has talked about. But Ambedkar's contribution, to my mind, is making that as a foundation to our Indian Constitution and laying that as a foundation for how India will lead post-independence. And that's where the contribution to the new way of living as a country of India, as a country, as India, post-independence is the core value of what Ambedkarji talked about. Thank you.
Thank you, Rukaiya ji.
Shall I make one observation only?
Please, please.
So, though it is not about Fernando's book as such, but it is connected with what humanistic movement we are talking about. That transformation of society and the person simultaneously. I think the current discussion about Gandhi and Ambedkar, though there is a structure of equality in constitution, but unless the individual changes, it will not work. I think Ambedkar also recognized that if people are not right, this constitution will not work. So I think this is also very important principle of humanism. Simultaneous change in person and the structure of society. This is observation. Parimal is welcome to talk.
Parimal ji, your concluding remarks.
So this book on humanism in India gives us an opportunity to learn, to look at the processes, and that history is a long process, and our lifetime is a very short part of the process. So to evaluate everything in the context of only what we see around us is is one way of looking at it, and understanding the long process of human evolution as a struggle against all forms of violence and injustice, and is another. This book also brings out absolute clarity about the role of humanist attitude, and that it is not created by humanist movement. It is already there among people. It was already there, as Rukaya madam said, that it was already there, and that is evident in the way the civilization has advanced. So this faith in human evolution in front of whatever negativity that we see around today, whatever fanaticism that we see around today, as Fernando explains in first letter to my friends, that those who believe in human future are not perplexed by whatever is going on around today. The human history, which has evolved for such a long period of time, is not going to be wiped out by stupid action of some individual today. So this gives as a firm conviction to strongly remain humanist and strongly promote humanism all around us, irrespective of the short-term success, acceptance or non-acceptance. That would be my summary. Thank you.
Thank you, Parimalji. Now I request Lakshmananji to propose a vote of thanks. Lakshmananji.
Ashutoshji, can I speak?
Yes, please go ahead. Please go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you, this we are discussing this Humanism in India book written by Fernando. So I wanted to know whether it is translated into any Indian languages so far, or if not translated, can you arrange for at least short summaries to be prepared in any Indian languages to
Yes,
popularize?
we'll take it up. Yes, it's a good suggestion. We'll definitely take it up.
Thank you. And thank you, Parimal sir, for very nice, interesting talk on humanism in India.
Now I request Lakshmananji to propose the vote of thanks.
Okay. Today, 55th anniversary of the Humanist movement, Humanist Party conducted this program. So, for the Humanist Party and the entire humanist people of our India, congratulate Parimal Merchant. Very much thank you. And especially Ashutosh ji and all the participants, Vibul ji, Dayan ji, and everybody. Once again, I am giving thanks, and we are planning to conduct such programs at least once in a month on behalf of the Humanist Party. So please, you participate. Expect your participation in the future programs. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Parimal. Thank you, Lakshman.
Thank
Thank you, Ashutosh.
Yeah, thank you, sir. Peace, force, and joy. Peace, force, and joy to everyone.
Peace,
For
force,
joining.
and joy to all.
Thank you all for joining us.
Okay, Vibal.